Well, good morning. How's everybody doing with the Lenten tool of fasting from such negative things as fear and anxiety, belief in lack and selfishness, etc.? How are you all doing?
Great.
Wonderful. How are you doing with using urges to indulge in things that you might have given up, like chocolate or sugar or alcohol? Well, we're honest. Wonderful. Are you using these battles with your urges, at least as reminders to remember your spiritual aim? Are you remembering to do that? Good. I see, Aletha, you shaking your head. Yes, good for you. If so, you are keeping up a true Lent. Fasting is a very effective tool that can help you evolve into a higher level of spiritual consciousness, like we talked about last week. And if you add an E to fast, what do you get? Feast. Are you feasting on such things as trusting in the divine order of things, peace, compassion? I ran across an alphabet of things this week that we can feast on. And being a teacher, when it's an alphabet, I'm going to love it. And I'd like to share them with you. I feel like that in today's world, I don't know about you, but I certainly feel like we need all the reminders we can get about our spiritual goals. So during Lent, let's think about feasting on this alphabet of things. A, acceptance of other people the way they are and you the way you are. B, behavior that's nice in all situations toward all people. C, cheering others on. D, defending others behind their backs. E, enriching the lives of others by your very presence. F, forgiveness of others and yourself. G, growth in spiritual matters. H, helping others when needed. I, including, never excluding others. J, joining instead of sitting in the sidelines of life. K, kneeling humbly in prayer, especially asking to see things differently. L, listening more often than speaking. M, motivating others when speaking. N, noticing the good in others and in yourself. O, overlooking the imperfection in others and yourself. P, providing for others in need. Q, quieting your negativity. R, respecting the rights of others. S, surprising others with small little gifts of delight, even if it's just a big smile. T, trying to be a better, more spiritual person. U, understanding, asking God for greater understanding. V, volunteering, giving yourself away in service. W, warming the hearts of those near you. X, expecting only good. Y, yielding when someone else has a better idea. Z, zipping your mouth when tempted to gossip. I changed that one. I'm preaching to myself here. One that was not mentioned was faith. I gave them to you pretty much the way they were, but I feel like that one needed to be there because we all need to especially work on that one, faith, because today's world, as we all know, is constantly inputting data that erodes faith. And we need to be aware of those forces and those forces and how they affect us, and remind ourselves constantly to have faith in the spiritual process. There's a little story that I ran across also this week that might remind you of what having faith can mean. It anthropomorphizes God, which I don't like, but in so doing, it also tells a great truth, if we can just get our intellects out of the way. It's a conversation between John Doe and God. John Doe, who is all in a tizzy, says, "God, can I ask you something?" God says, "Well, sure, John." "John, promise you won't get mad?" "I promise." John, frustrated, "Why did you let so much stuff happen to me today?" God, "What do you mean, John?" "Well, I woke up late to begin with." "Yes." "My car took forever to start." "Okay." Growling at this point. "At lunch, they made my sandwich completely wrong, and she took 30 minutes to make it." "And on the way home, my phone went dead just as I picked it up for an important call." "All right." "And to top the whole thing off, when I got home, I just wanted to soak my feet in my foot massager and relax, but it wouldn't work. Nothing went right today. Why did you do all that to me?" "Well, let me see, John. The death angel was at your bed this morning, and I had to send one of my special angels to battle with him for your life. I'll let you sleep through that one." "Oh, I didn't let your car start because there was a drunk driver on your route that might have hit you if you had been on the road." "Oh. The first person who would have made your sandwich was sick, and I didn't want you to catch what they had because I knew you couldn't afford to miss work this week." "Oh. Your phone went dead because the person that was calling was going to give a false witness about what you said on that very call. I didn't even let you talk to them so that you'd be completely covered." "Oh, I see, God. Oh, and that foot massager, it had a short in it that was going to throw out all the power in your house, to say the least of what could have happened. I didn't think you wanted to be in the dark or be electrocuted." "Oh, I'm sorry, God." "Don't be sorry. Just learn to trust me in all things that happen, good and bad." "I will trust you, God. And don't doubt that my plan for your day is always better than your plan." "I won't, God. And let me tell you, God, thank you for everything you did for me today." "You're welcome, child. It was just another day being your God, and I love looking after my children." At Unity, we don't believe in some punishing God with a long beard up there in the sky, kind of like the Greek god Zeus, punishing us for our sins. And I don't believe in some anthropomorphic God that's up there controlling us and the world like some puppeteer making bad things happen to punish us or to manipulate things so we can avoid something worse. And yet, I do believe that there is some unifying force that we can plug into that can guide our way if we'll just have a little faith in the process. It's like plugging into the internet. We plug into it correctly and we ask a question and we have no idea how much data is going through there to get the answer. But it calculates, it puts it all together, and it comes up with yes, no, 1957, or Detroit. That's kind of how it works when we plug ourselves into the divine order of things, this omniscience. That is a part of what we call God in shorthand. It's like plugging in to all the answers available so that we can unconsciously guide ourselves to our highest good based on the data that we get or feel. I could give you 1,000 intellectual reasons why the internet won't work, or why it will be wrong if it does work. It's just too unbelievable to believe, really, this interconnectedness of the whole world. But it does work. The story is a kind of metaphor for that. Basically, it represents the faith that we must have in things unseen, but whose results work absolutely. And to continue the metaphor, this is the time of year when we're trying to reboot ourselves spiritually. Lent. It's hard in today's world to find ways to maintain our faith and to stay focused on spiritual goals. Our senses become dull when we don't heighten our focus at times. We become so obsessed with worldly matters out there and television, whatever's going on, whatever we hear, that we might miss the obvious that is right there in our faces. Because truth isn't always visible on the physical plane, even though God's handiwork is everywhere, which we certainly can see at this time of year in the spring with all of the blossoms and the flowers and the trees and the birds, everything. Just look at the miracles of nature. The Lenten tools of prayer and fasting are effective ways to wake ourselves up from sleep, from being the stimulus response machines that most people are if they aren't working on themselves. During Lent, dealing with the urge to partake of certain things that we commit to giving up, it doesn't really matter what they are, can help create a state of heightened awareness in us so that we don't keep falling back into our programmed automatic state. The point is to ultimately get free of whatever binds us to our more limited selves so that we can stay in a higher state of consciousness, a state that allows us to then recognize and even resonate with the higher planes and not just the dense physical plane. Many refer to that state as the kingdom of heaven. Some call it enlightenment. If we resonate with these higher states, these higher vibrations, it's kind of like having the whole internet available to us rather than being confined to just one word processing document that only our individual thoughts are producing. Lent can be a training season, like the training season for any sport. Many might think that for the high school football team, for the boys to spend an hour a day lifting weights instead of just practicing the game is a waste of time. But the players who do it know why it's critical to develop their bodies. It allows them to effectively execute those football plays when the game is going on. And by the same token, we may think that to give things up, like sugar, alcohol, or negative thinking, whatever, isn't helpful. But if you do, you soon realize that they are effective practices toward developing, actually activating, your spiritual self. It helps us remember our goals in a visceral way. Now, the word Lent actually comes from the Anglo-Saxon word for spring, which is derived from a verb which means to lengthen. Lent comes in the spring when the days are lengthened. This annual season of fasting, praying, and penitence has been observed by Westerners since the 1st century after Christ, though it has not always been 40 days. In more recent times, it has been kept at 40 days because of the example of Moses and Elijah and Jesus. They're fasting and they're praying. Jesus, the 40 days of temptation in the wilderness, etc. Now, for you mathematicians here, yes, Ash Wednesday is actually 46 days before Easter. But the 6 Sundays during the Lenten season aren't counted as Lent because in the Western tradition, Sunday is considered to be a feast day. I'm sure if you live in Metairie, you will notice that today. Thus, the 40 weekdays beginning with Ash Wednesday constitute Lent, just the weekdays. Now, the ashes on Ash Wednesday, by the way, symbolize penitence, a getting rid of, a burning up of the old, the ultimate fasting, when you just get rid of it. The 40-day Lenten fast is an all-round denial of sense demands and era thinking, and can thus produce the ability to better incorporate ourselves into the oneness with all, our oneness with the divine. Primarily, Lent is a time to prepare us mentally, spiritually, and physically for a new awakening, a resurrection at Easter, a resurrection from our old states of consciousness that prevented us from experiencing the peace and joy and love that are possible for all of us all the time. Now, to elevate ourselves, to resurrect from these old states of consciousness, one of the first things we need to remember is to more regularly engage in honest self-reflection, maybe even brutal self-honesty, so that we best know what to give up. A daily, even hourly self-inventory is of great benefit. And be sure that this self-honesty doesn't devolve into self-chastisement. Give yourself a pat on the back for noticing what needs to be corrected, and then just let it go, or work on letting it go. Don't berate and punish yourself because you saw it. That is the ego's way of creating guilt, which is not an effective way to change. It will just make you feel so bad that you start buffering out what you see or end up abandoning the whole process. The ego is tricky. Just notice with caring, loving eyes what you would like to heal in yourself with no self-judgment. Then, when you have, through intensive self-honesty, identified what you would like to change about yourself, you can apply the Lenten tools of fasting and praying, thus telling your ego in no uncertain terms that you are engaged in something, your spiritual transformation, and you are in control, not your ego. Give yourself over to the process and you start feeling another level of consciousness. This is the power of giving up some of our comfort zone demands. The fact is that far wiser people than any of us have known for thousands of years the effects and advantages of this kind of thinking and fasting. It can be fasting from comfort, from food, leisure time, negativity, whatever. It's like a rite of passage. The sacrifices thus make a visceral impression on yourself that lasts, and it makes a deep impression on your subconscious. And so go Lenten vows. They help us chisel away little by little at our earth-bound selves that are so prone to being just material robots. These vows make an impression on our psyches. They are reminders that we are marching to a different drummer. We are in the world, but not of it. We choose to live above the worldly chaos out there. We commit ourselves to a higher level of existence. And fasting and praying are ways to gain dominion over the ego that wants us to live a worldly, material existence of being separate from others and separate from our higher self and separate from God. Its success for thousands of years, this Lenten process in all spiritual schools that I know of, East and West, among millions of people, is really hard to argue with. So don't cheat yourself. Every time I pass by that health food store on Metairie Road and resist pulling in and buying one of those big, juicy chocolate mint protein cookies that I gave up, and I can justify really easily going to get one because there's protein in it, but I don't. I feel empowered, and I know that I'm going toward my goal, not because I gave up the cookie. That's irrelevant. It's what it's helping me overcome in myself. Every time I resist saying something judgmental, I feel the same way. And when I notice that something negative just slipped out of my mouth again, I let myself notice it, and I rededicate myself to my goal. I do a lot of rededication. No comment. And I use the opportunity of failure to re-examine why I feel the urge to engage in the negativity. And that's the biggest help. And I had to have one of my mentors help me see this. Look at the seeds. Why is it you're feeling that? This is the time of year to stop and investigate those things. It's not just, I'm not going to say it. It's, well, why am I tempted to say it? Why am I feeling this way? So I get to look at the negativity and where it's coming from and maybe permanently overcome it instead of just not say it. I look at the root cause, thus even a slip. Even if you fall off the wagon, so to speak, it can be a huge spiritual tool. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore was the antithesis of someone who believed in needless spiritual rituals, any kind of dogma, and certainly fundamentalist beliefs. But he said, and I quote, "Unity students everywhere are invited yearly to participate in the Lenten program. Fasting means abstaining from. The place of overcoming is in our consciousness. The 40-day fast is an all-round denial of sense demands. We abstain from error thinking, and we meditate on spiritual truth until we incorporate it into the consciousness of our oneness with the divine. We are mounting to a higher consciousness." End of quote. Again, it's like being plugged in to this universal internet. You may not see all the individual data that goes into the program, but the right answers just keep popping up. There's some kind of power of purity that is developed, and we start seeing a better way of living. You notice that some people call this all, this power, this omniscience that you can plug into, God, or Brahman, or Allah, or Spirit. You access it, you realize that it's what all the great sages have been talking about forever. It's like seeing your car remote turn on the lights from across the parking lot. You can't see what's connecting your remote to your car, but you realize there's something unseen that connects them and operates them. As surely as you can touch that remote with your hands and then see your car lights flash. There is an unseen interconnectedness of all things and all people, and we can plug into it. Prayer and fasting are ways to put a new battery in your remote and raise you above this dense physical plane that sometimes obscures that ability. But then you go back to your daily routine, And within a few hours, you completely forget this new awareness, and you settle back into thinking that if your five senses can't see, smell, taste, hear, or touch something, that it doesn't exist. And then life starts getting difficult again, bogged down in the material. You find yourself going down a lot of meaningless paths, and your thinking can get chaotic. Consequently, you can manifest chaos in your life. Your sense body has settled back down into its trodden, familiar path. It's familiar, but it's not particularly fulfilling. Then someone offers you the chocolate or beer or sugar that you gave up, and you have the urge to partake, but then you remember your fast. This wakes you up. It plugs you in again. You get off the merry-go-round of purely material existence, and you once again plug into a higher state by remembering who you are and what you're really doing. How that works, we don't really fully understand, but it does. We can all verify that. It's like you recalibrate. You're able to reboot yourself. It's like you're no longer confined to your simple Word document that you alone have to generate. You have again accessed the universal internet, and your life is richer because of it. So keep on keeping on with your Lenten pursuits, using the season to raise your consciousness toward more eternal values and more enlightened ways of living. Fasting and prayer are formidable tools that you can use to help you along. And remember, it's never too late to start or to restart. Charles Fillmore, in his book, Keep a True Lent, quoted Revelations 21, which says, "These things shall be a loftier race than e'er the world hath known shall rise, with flame of freedom in their souls and light of knowledge in their eyes. Nation with nation, land with land, unarmed, shall live as comrades free. In every heart and brain shall throb the pulse of one fraternity." Fillmore said about this quote, "The time is ripe for the advent of a new race, the advent of the spiritualized man. This will be brought about not by a miracle or the fiat of God, but by the gradual refinement of the man of the flesh into the man of the spirit." And that is what we're aiming for. The tools of Lent, fasting and praying, can speed up that process. We are all progressing toward this state of enlightenment in this lifetime or maybe another lifetime. But why deny ourselves of the opportunity to hurry it along so that we can reap the untold benefits like joy and peace and love? So keep up your good efforts. It works if you work it. Amen.